Welcome to episode 83 of Rebirth Revolution. My name is Melissa Olson. This week, we're going to get into a subject that can be sticky at times. It's about the relationships between men and women. The purpose is not to bash anyone. The very most important people in my life all happen to be men. Granted, I raised most of them. They are my sons and grandson. But I have no axe to grind here. It's just that there has been an enormous shift in my lifetime with what men and women mean to each other. So here we go. Back in the past, women had no rights to speak of. They were considered the property of men and could be treated any which way that the men in their lives chose. They had no money, no power, no place in the work world. The culture was built around the wants and needs of white men, and women were there to make sure they were happy. Women did whatever it took to make them happy because the men had all the power. You see a segment of our current collective culture who wish it would go back to those so-called simpler times. One thing about it was that there were sharply defined roles that each played in everyday life, and few questioned these roles. The men would go to work, come home to the dinner that had been prepared for them, put their feet up and read the paper, and then go to bed and do it again the next day. On weekends they would mow the lawn, and on a good day they would take the garbage out. The women in their lives did everything else. They raised the children. They kept everything about everyone's life going. They were responsible for everything in the house and everyone in the house. In exchange, they had a house to live in, which would have been extremely difficult to have otherwise. Most women did not make any money to speak of. They did not have their own bank accounts, and they couldn't get loans or credit cards on their own. They were, in essence, financial hostages. There was a saying back in the day which went one of two ways. It was either, "She didn't marry well," or "She married well." This meant that she had been able to somehow entice a man who made a good living and was of decent character to marry her. Her station in life, the degree of difficulty she would experience, and the relative comfort and joy she was going to be able to experience in her lifetime were dependent on the man she married. The man was the prize. If you married a man who didn't have a well-paying job, you lived your life in poverty. If you married a man who beat you and your children, you spent your life in an abusive relationship. If you married someone who was unwilling or incapable of being faithful, you spent your life sucking it up and pretending you didn't notice. For a woman to find fault with the match she had made would leave her in a financially perilous position. Not to mention the fact that the culture, including other women, would probably shun her. She would instantly become a dangerous woman who they would suppose would be on the hunt for the men that they themselves had bagged. If the men behaved badly, society, including men and women, would assume it was the wife's fault. For so long, there was no social safety net for women. This one decision, the one of who you married, would be the most defining choice you would ever make. And men knew it. It only illuminated the excess of power that they already possessed. Of course, the men were always free to go out for a pack of cigarettes and never return. They could leave at the drop of a hat, and their standard of living would not have been affected adversely. In fact, their standard of living would be higher since they were no longer contributing to the upkeep of their wives or children. They could leave their wife and children to fend for themselves, and not much was done about it. Child support was not signed into law until 1975, and even then there were no real legal consequences for the men. Many men just didn't and still don't pay what they have been ordered to pay in the support of their children. The deck was stacked in favor of the men. They called all the shots. This made them the prize. I have been alive to see seismic shifts in the man-woman dynamic. Women moved into the institutions of higher learning that had once been almost exclusively male. Women moved into the workforce, which had once been almost exclusively male, and women gained access to birth control, which gave them a control over their destiny that they had not had before. This allowed women to enter the workforce in a more meaningful way, though the pay structure remained, and remains to this day, a relic of the past. It is built on the assumption that men are the serious wage earners that keep families afloat, and that women are somehow just gathering supplemental, less important income. But the shift happened. Men left women to raise the children in way too many cases, and women are now the head of households in half of the homes in America. Yet the pay structure still acts like women work to buy that fancy hat that their husband doesn't want to pay for. Women have been left straddling the worlds of work and home, wanting to be taken seriously in their professions, and yet unable to offload a proportionate amount of their previous role in the home. I see this getting better in the younger generations, and it is important in a way that is not entirely about simple fairness. The previous gender roles that society placed on its members allowed everyone half or less of a full human experience. It was structured in such a way that men were to fully engender logic and women were to represent all that was emotional. There was an underlying assumption that neither sex was a fully functioning human being with the capacity to fully develop their critical thinking skills or understand and constructively express their emotions. They needed to pair up to find their better half who could fill in the gender role that was not accessible to them. If a man wanted to eat, he would need to find a wife who would cook. If a woman wanted a roof over her head, she would have to find a husband who had the access to the financial systems that would make that possible. You weren't so much focused on whether or not you would be happy together, you just needed to be together for survival. This misunderstanding was passed down from one generation to the next as children observed who did which jobs and what standard each parent was held to. If your mother mowed the lawn and your dad did the dishes, your household was probably seen as a bit weird. But we are moving forward now, and the old ways of the past that limited each person's experience are no longer of use to us. We are here to have the entire experience, not half of it. We are here to unearth and unleash all of our capabilities, no matter what gender we chose before we came here. Men need to have the fully immersive experience of caring for their children. There are lessons embedded in that experience that cannot be found elsewhere. Women need to have fully immersive experiences of engaging in the outside world. They need to know that they have valuable input to share with others. No one can find their full self when they are limiting the scope of the activities that are available to them based on gender. One of the side effects of society granting value to people embracing one side of themselves and ignoring the other is that we have forced people to find their value in being an exaggerated version of what their gender is purported to be. Men have been shackled with the expectations that come with extreme masculinity. They are valued for being ruthless, singularly focused, unemotional, and driven to get whatever they want, no matter how it affects others. The ability to dehumanize others throughout the history of civilization has been valued because with it came material success. A man could make more money farming if he used unpaid slave labor in the fields. This made him more successful, and as such, of higher standing in the community. This is not to let women off the hook, though. They would be more attracted to the slave owner because he could give them a life that was more comfortable. Since the beginning of time, women have been shackled with the expectation that they focus on the attributes of their personalities and physicality that would appeal to someone who is hypermasculine and therefore possibly more successful. Being in step with whatever the current standards are for beauty, along with being sweet and compliant, are goals that certainly take up a bunch of brain space and time. It leaves little personal resources to pursue one's own hopes and dreams. So they pursue the prize, the man. The whole system worked until it didn't. And what had been continues to feel like an entitlement to those who have not yet shifted to where this story is going. Not everyone is aware that the male-female dynamic is shifting. There are some men who are objectively unattractive, but have enough resources that they still feel that they are entitled to the love and devotion of a woman who would not look at them otherwise. There are men who think that the family unit is their own personal kingdom, who react in violent and horrific ways when women choose to end the relationship. There are some women who are not prepared to become their full selves yet, and are drawn to the relationships that will make them betray themselves over and over again. Women can hide from the responsibility of becoming their full selves in any number of relationships with men who prefer the old style of relationship with an imbalance of power. But all of this is to be expected. When there is a seismic shift in any dynamic, there are those who will see the benefit and will be willing to do the work involved in embracing it, and others who only experience a frightening sense of loss. While all of this is going on, it feels chaotic, it feels out of control. This doesn't bring out the best in people. We humans like to know what is coming next, and these shifts deny us any sense of certainty. So what are the benefits? We are all here to learn and grow and evolve into the best version of ourselves that we can. Opening the world of possibilities to everything instead of just what people used to think our genders were capable of achieving means that you can fully express your gifts and talents. You can pursue that which interests you without these artificial barriers. It also means that the bar is raised in every single aspect of life. When I look at the lives of some of the old white men around us, I feel it is appropriate to put an asterisk next to their achievements. They lived in a time when only white men were admitted to higher education, when only white men would be considered for the higher paying jobs, when only white men were put in positions of power to make the rules that the rest of the culture was forced to live by. They never had to compete against women or people of color who were granted the same opportunities. So everything they did was basically the best that a white man could do. That is a woefully limited sample group. Once women and people of color fought their way into the systems, it turned out that they were better at many things. They brought an experience and perspective that could not be envisioned, let alone championed, by those who had always held all the power. It is understandable that this feels like a very uncomfortable loss for those who have not had to work as hard to succeed. And not having to work as hard has made some of them soft and incapable of going toe-to-toe with those who had to fight like hell just to get into the room. So they will use whatever power they have left to try to legislate us back into a world where they were the only ones on top and the rest of us served to make them rich and significant. You can't really blame them. This system they set up works for them, and it works against the rest of us. That is the point. It's hard to find a human who has power, who can willingly, gracefully share it with others. Part of having power is deluding yourself into thinking that you are the only one who deserves it and is capable of wielding it appropriately. But a leveled playing field means that we can find solutions to the multitude of problems we face, solutions that take into account every angle possible. Our solutions will be based in both logic and emotion. We can be smart and compassionate. We are getting ready as a collective culture to fully blossom into our best selves and create the world around us that reflects that achievement. It's great to have you back for another week of Rebirth Revolution. There's so much that's going on that we need to sort through. Let me know if there's a particular topic we can break down rebirth style. Email me at rebirthrev@gmail.com. This podcast can be found everywhere podcasts exist, as well as on YouTube. If you can like, follow, and comment on Apple Podcasts, more people could find us. Full episodes also play on our Facebook page. Check us out on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Until next week, figure out if you have gender-based limitations in your mind. Ask yourself what you're drawn to. Look into voting for more women and people of color, and wear your mask when it's appropriate. Remember, you are loved exactly as much as every other person on the planet, not 1 ounce more or 1 ounce less. Stay strong and safe and in an expansive frame of mind.